Welcome to the Comparative Digital Book Review of Shifting the Monkey by Todd Whitaker and Move Your Bus by Ron Clark. Two outstanding books written by longtime educators. These are very popular books, very quick and easy reads. Let's take a look at who these authors are. Todd Whitaker is one of the most celebrated speakers for education conferences, but also business conferences. In fact, he wrote this book from an educator's point of view as it overlays into the business world. So he started out as a teacher, of course, then a school leader, then a university professor, and now a celebrated speaker at conferences around the world. Similarly, Ron Clark, he is the current principal of Ron Clark Academy in Atlanta, the famed Ron Clark Academy. He started out, of course, as a school teacher, then a school leader, and now he's also, like Whitaker, one of these world-renowned speakers called in to speak for business, education, doesn't really matter. They're traversing these two landscapes quite well. So there are two educators who wrote two books about school culture and about collaborative teaming, and they have very, very similar parallels that we're going to dig in today. So let's take a look at this comparison. So what's the big idea? So for Shifting the Monkey, we have a key big idea of this monkey metaphor. And the monkey, in a sense, is simply problems or tasks that arise in the work that you do. And there are key questions that he wants all leaders to ask themselves as they're dealing with problems or monkeys that are on people's backs. So here's the big idea. He says we've got to break down where these monkeys are and why they are in certain places. So where are the problems and where should they be? So we ask, where's the monkey? So where is this problem? Well, it's on this person's back. And we have to ask ourselves, well, now that we know where it is, where should the monkey be? This is where we get into a great leadership point of view, where we have the leader who knows where things belong and can shift those things and get them in the right place. Because what the last thing we want is a problem to be on the wrong person's shoulders. Sometimes our best workers are shouldering our worst workers' tasks or problems. And sometimes even in business, our customers are shouldering some of the things that they should not have to worry about. Or in certain cases, our students, they have a monkey on their back that doesn't belong there. So you have to ask, where is the monkey? Where should it be? And then lastly, how do I shift the monkey to its proper place? How do I get it back to where it belongs so that the system runs smooth, the system runs clean, and our best workers are happy doing the work they're supposed to do, doing their job, and then other folks can do their job. So the monkey metaphor is really the core of the entire book, and these three questions are essential for leading that charge. So what's the big idea for Move Your Bus? So he's got another metaphor, a very powerful one. It's the key to the entire book. It's this idea that we are all on this bus together, moving forward, hopefully. But there are folks in that dynamic that could make the bus go in perhaps the wrong direction, or make the bus go slower. So let's take a look at who is on this bus. So we have four types of people on the bus. Key elements here start with runners. These are your top performers, your peak performers. They don't need to be told a whole lot because they are already there to do that kind of work. In fact, they're almost doing too much work if you're not careful, and you could burn out those runners if they're, say, carrying the wrong monkeys on their back. So the runners are the ones keeping the bus moving at a breakneck speed. You want as many of those as you can get, although Clark says it's hard to have an organization that's entirely full of runners. Secondly, we've got joggers. These folks are on the bus, and their momentum is moving, just not as fast as pace as the runners, but they are important people, and they're moving along. They're doing a good job day in and day out at whatever the task may be, whether it's teaching 8th grade or working in the HR department. Next, we have walkers. These folks are challenging the runners and joggers in the motion forward momentum of the bus. So these folks are moving at a far slower pace. They need to be prodded more often. And so they do become problematic. But we have one more group that becomes even more worrisome for the driver of the bus. And these are the riders who are absolutely doing nothing for the bus. The movement is not there. And it's very, very hard to capture any energy into their sails. So we may not have a reason to really focus our efforts on riders and walkers because they're just unlikely to run. And both Clark and Whitaker speak to folks like this in each book, and they take a pretty hard line on not focusing energy on those sort of last two groups, especially the riders. Almost zero energy should be dedicated to them, according to the authors, because your investment in them is simply not going to return. So that's the big core idea of Move Your Bus. So we're going to focus our energy on those runners, inspire and unleash them to perform. And this is actually what leads us to the crossover between the books. Very, very similar. It's almost as if they wrote it in tandem with each other. So let's take a look at some of those crossover pieces. The crossover: treat all people in your organization well. But there's kind of a caveat there. They're saying treat everyone well. However, the top performers, they do get better treatment. They do get better resources. They get better assignments and projects. They're advocating for doling out the best of the best for the best. And so there's some pushback there, I'm sure, depending on your background and your role. But they really believe that a lot of your problems are going to solve themselves by treating all your employees well, but treating those uh, top performers in a different way. It does move the bus, if you will. So we protect and unencumber our starters, our first stringers. That's another core concept across both books. Those people should not be doing, according to the authors, menial, basic tasks. They should be leading committees. They should be leading large-scale projects. They should be having far more access to the power and source code of the school or the organization or the business. So when you unencumber them and free them and unleash them to perform, then they will. And the other folks, they can do other things until they decide to become a runner or become a first stringer. Those are shared ideas across both books. So when your starters make mistakes, there's a similar idea noting for the starters. We want to let some things slide. So both Whitaker and Clark say that it is crucial because runners run themselves so hard, starters run themselves so hard that any mistake they take very seriously, and they are very bruised by those things and are very self-critical. They're already critical enough of themselves, essentially, is what both authors are saying. So sometimes you have to let those things slide, and they often are so good that they know that they made a mistake. They shore it up immediately, and you almost never see it again. So be gentle there in certain cases with your starters because they will often self-correct. Another crossover for the books is that all of this is on the leader. Basically, whatever you let slide is what goes. It is all set the tone by the leader. So it is not impossible to create the culture that you want in your school or your business or your organization. It's really not beyond your control. Both authors have done it and have written many books on it and have tons of proof in their success. So it really, for them, is all on the leader. And they get it through clarity. It is the absolute key. How do you get this culture? You tell people exactly what you want, what kind of behavior you want. Tell exactly how you want it done, and then model it, and then reinforce it, and follow up on it. So similar to the Navy SEALs, trust but verify. I trust you to go do it, but I'm going to come check on it. And also clarity is how you can avoid some of the resentment that might breed from some of the walkers and the walkers and the riders. If you're clear to them exactly what you want, it's harder for them to resent the runners for getting better positions, better resources, things like that. So clarity really is key. The leader is clear. They can have a higher chance at creating that culture that they want to see. So let's take a look at the star moments from Shifting the Monkey. Obviously, the monkey metaphor is really interesting, a powerful moment from the book overall. We know that we have these problems or tasks seen in the idea of monkeys on the back. Are they on the right back? And if they're not, can we move them? But moreover, we have the danger of punishing all for the actions of the few. Now, what we're saying here is it's something that happens perennially in schools and in businesses. One or two folks violate a rule. For example, in the book, Whitaker says one or two people are constantly late, chronically late, and now everyone has to clock in. These rules for the few, blanketed to the whole, are very damaging. And he says punishing everyone for the misdeeds of a few takes the monkeys off the backs of the bad employees and puts them squarely on the backs of the good employees. And so what we're doing here now is we're potentially turning our starters into something else that maybe they were motivated and highly motivated, and now they're not so much or not at all, and then sometimes they leave. How often do we have our best talent leave us? So be careful in punishing all for the actions of a few. And he also provides a recipe for a successful culture. And there's three elements, and they're very, very clear, very simple, and very powerful. First, treat everyone well. That includes everyone, best and worst. Secondly, though, there's a kind of caveat there. We do make our best decisions based on our best people in mind. So essentially, what he's asking for in the book is, who do you want mad at you? People that are always mad, have already been mad, and probably always will be, or people that were happy and motivated, and now they're not because we made decisions based on maybe those actions of the few. And then finally, the recipe ends with protect your good people first. So it's kind of indicative of the big idea of the book there, too. And both books really cross over there as well, is this idea of protect your starters, treat them well, and everything else comes along with it. Star moments from Move Your Bus. We obviously have the bus metaphor, and the reason this is a star moment is because it overlays so nicely to Anthony Muhammad's work in transforming school culture. It isn't exactly one-to-one, but it is very close. You got your runners and believers. These two groups are the go-getters. They're out there to do whatever it takes. The joggers and the tweeners. The joggers are grinding it out every day, doing a good job, but they are up for grabs on which way they could go. Could they become runners, or are they going to downgrade to walkers? And speaking of walkers, we do have our fundamentalists. They are moving, but perhaps not at the right speed, or perhaps maybe in a slightly different directions, pulling us off course slightly. And then finally, we have our riders and our survivors. And that parallel, it could not be clearer. These people are going nowhere and don't want to go anywhere. So it's really challenging dealing with them. So we don't want to let runners in our next star moment run in the wrong direction. So we're not treating our runners well. They could become potentially joggers, walkers, and at the most extreme, we could turn them into riders. But really, more importantly, we just don't want runners to decide to run the wrong way. They're using the same energy, except in the wrong direction. So many good overlays there between the Muhammad book and Move Your Bus. And finally, a star moment for me is positivity. Clark really preaches positivity. In his mind, we've got to stop the gossip. We've got to stop the toxic conversations. If it's not positive, then we're just not going to say it. So he's very heavy on how that could be leveraged to inculcate positivity in every corner of the building, in every conversation. So this is some of the star moments from Move Your Bus. And finally, let's talk a little bit about the pushback. We're going to have three different elements of pushback here from three different books. So in the innovator's mindset, Kuros takes a different approach. He doesn't have necessarily the almost deficit mindset for some folks that work in your organization or business. He provides strategies that help the unmotivated become motivated, whereas Whitaker and Clark don't want to put hardly any, if any, energy into those folks. Kuros, on the other hand, he says, look, let's find out what people are passionate about. Let's find out what their talents are, and let's align our work to those things, and that will naturally move those immovable people forward. Similarly, in Transforming School Culture, Anthony Muhammad mentions, look, we have levels of fundamentalism that we could break through, and depending on the level, depending on how far we can move this person to the next level that we want them to be at. And he even has strategies to help survivors maybe potentially be salvaged. But in Whitaker and Clark's case, it's just, they're not salvageable in some cases, in many of the pages in the book. And finally, we have this really interesting dilemma with Dan Pink's drive and the motivation recipe. So really, how do you get people on board? Should you help them and support them, as Kuros and Muhammad says, and show them the way? Or until you make the choice to be on this bus yourself, the autonomous choice, then you never will be. So it's really interesting because Dan Pink's offering this idea of motivation being sparked by how much choice that you have. So is it a forced choice, or is it truly a natural choice? So it's a little bit of a dilemma there in how we want to see that and handle those folks that are on the bus but maybe aren't necessarily providing the kind of energy forward that we want them to. So in the end, we look at both books and we see that they are very similar in overarching themes, but one of the major takeaways will probably be honor and protect your best people first. And that's one of the key takeaways for this book. Both books are great. We have a chance for leadership teams or leaders to dive into either one. They're very quick, could be great book club reads, and both have their nuance, but both are very similar in the idea of how do we improve a culture and create the culture that we love, that we want to see, where people are positive and engaged every day. Thank you for listening.